And I look at our ministry comparable to a casarina tree where the root systems are very shallow. And the strength of that tree relates to each root intermeshing up with each other. And once one tree falls and that root is loosened, then the entire network becomes somewhat weakened. Mr. Speaker, I look at our ministry as that. Mr. Speaker, I want to reflect back to when I first entered politics. I returned home in 1985, and in 1987, our former leader, Cecil Wallace Whitfield, had asked me to run in 1987, in the 1987 election as an FNM candidate. At that time, Mr. Speaker, having just recently returned from home, I felt that I was not, at that time, emotionally, psychologically, financially, physically, or spiritually prepared. And therefore, I had delayed that for another time. Time has passed, and I've again been approached by our Prime Minister, very good friend of mine, Honorable Hubert Ingraham, and again I felt that I was not emotionally nor financially prepared to enter the realms of politics. However, in 2005, Mr. Speaker, I felt at that time that I was financially, emotionally, physically, and spiritually and psychologically ready to enter frontline politics. But before I entered frontline politics, Mr. Speaker, I remembered very well I was driving home in 2005 with my last son, who at that time was 11 years old. And I said to him that I was thinking about embarking in frontline politics, but before I went, I wanted to know how he, at that time in 2005, my 11-year-old son felt about me going into frontline politics. And Mr. Speaker, the words that he said resonated with me. He said to me, an 11-year-old boy, he said to me that he did not like politics, but if I were entering politics for the right reason, he would accept. I then asked him, what were those reasons? And he said to me, Mr. Speaker, an 11-year-old, my 11-year-old son, he said to me, you must remember, one, you must remember that you are there to help the people and not yourself. Two, you must never become arrogant. Three, he said that I must never feel that you are better than anyone else. Four, he said that you must never become corrupt. Five, he said to me, that you must always remember that the people come first. And you must never try to enrich yourself at the expense of the people. Mr. Speaker, the last words he said to me, which resonated to me while driving home in 2005, is that I must remember that I was working for the people and not the people working for me. Mr. Speaker, those words in 2005 resonated with me. And he said to me that if you entered politics and you bear these reasons in mind and I adhere to them, then he would accept and he would support me. But if I deviated or do not believe in the reasons that he gave, then he could not agree. Mr. Speaker, I was moved by those words in 2005 by my 11-year-old son, who is now 16. And listening to him, Mr. Speaker, why those words resonated to me so well was because I felt that that was how the future generation of the Bahamas felt. And that was what they were looking for in their politicians. Mr. Speaker, those are the expectations of the youths of our country today. The youths are our future, and we should all reflect upon what was said to me then. This budget, Mr. Speaker, this budget protects the future of the Bahamas. This speaks the words uttered by my then 11-year-old son. Mr. Speaker, what I admire most about our Prime Minister is he lives by those words. He always put the people and his country first, even sometimes at the expense of his family. He has never appeared arrogant, and I ask many of you here today, how many of you can do like our Prime Minister do? Sometimes walks into an area like Baintown or Farm Road, walks into somebody's house and says to her, "Miss Jones, what are you cooking? Food smells good." And she said, "Oh, I'm just doing dumpling or whatever." And he said, "Anyhow, just give me that spoon." And he would go and stir that pot, "Just give me that spoon." And he tasted it and said, "No, this don't taste right. Give me some of that salt or pepper. Let me add to this." And he eats it. And then he said, "Now this is right. Now this is right, Miss Jones." Can you imagine what that does to those individuals? This is what I've seen and experienced with this Prime Minister. That is nothing to do with arrogance. He lives by the words of my 11-year-old son in 2006. But, Mr. Speaker, what resonated to me again in 2006, when an individual, a business individual, who had previously voted for the FNM, was campaigning, had voted for the PLP in 2002, a former FNM, who had voted for the PLP in 2002. And he was asked, why did he support or why did he vote for the PLP, being a prominent FNM? And the words that he said resonated to me. He said, "If I voted for the PLP, a vote for the PLP is not in the country's best interest, but it was in his personal best interest. If he voted for Ingram, a vote for Ingram would have been in the country's best interest, but not in his personal best interest." And therefore, it was his decision to vote for the PLP, because that was in his personal best interest. Mr. Speaker, each and every one of us should vote and consider the country first. And anyone, be it on this side or that side, who thinks of himself first, then would not be of any great benefit to the country and should not be in frontline politics, because country should always come first. Mr. Speaker, for this reason, knowing that our Prime Minister always put country first as opposed to personal gain, knowing that he lives by what was said to me in 2005, I and many others will continue to follow those views and this Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, during the 2010 mid-year budget review, I spoke to the nation of the employment of careful management resources and improved efficiencies in operation in the public health sector. And I applauded the fact that those efficiencies cost no money, but resulted in greater satisfactory service to the public. As we go through these economic times, Mr. Speaker,